racing, and one of the clips you're going to see, if you'll go ahead and start this clip up. This is a new adventure that I started last year. And let me turn it down just a little bit, but this is called the Baja 1000. I don't know if anybody knows what the Baja 1000 is. It is the world's most dangerous race. And at 41 years old, I decided that I was going to jump on a $15,000 motorcycle, and I was going to race through the desert at 100 miles an hour. And so I get on this motorcycle, and before we actually went over there and did this, when we arrived in Ensenada, Mexico, you know all the dangers in Mexico right now. Actually, we gave 1,000 Bibles out to children all over Mexico. We spent time at orphanages, and we just shared Christ with all the racers and all these crazy people that are kind of associated with this race. But one of the things that I was taught, I was trained by a professional Baja racer. And one of the things that he told me was, Christian, do not go fast on the first 50 miles. Make sure that you go slow. Do not ride any wheelies. Don't be showing off. There's going to be helicopters following you. There's going to be NBC cameras on you. He said, do not go fast. Do not go, don't do any wheelies. Don't try to show off for the people at all, because you can get hurt. More people get hurt in the first 50 miles than any other time. And so we're talking about living on the edge today. And we're talking about also what happens when we live on the edge. And you'll get to check this out right here. 10 miles into the ride. Broke my hand, broke my arm, broke some of my ribs, and got knocked unconscious. Actually, you can't hear it, but I woke up right when the guy with the red shirt came up, and he asked me if I wanted a Corona, which I guess is a fix-all in Mexico. And I looked at my arm, and me being a pastor, I looked at my arm, and I realized my arm was broken. I looked at him, I said, I don't think a Corona's going to get it, brother. You got any Jose Cuervo? Which is actually the liquor version of it. So anyway, I didn't drink anything, so don't anybody send me any emails, okay? And so I jumped up on the bike, and you can see some of the subtitles here. I told the guy that I think I broke my arm, and I'm kicking my peg down, because the last thing you really want to do is hang out in one of these cities in Mexico and just kind of say, I need some help, I'm going to leave my bike with you, and I'll pick it up later. That doesn't happen, okay? So I jumped up on the bike. He said, did you hurt your arm? And I said, I think it's broken. And then he said, really? And then I said, I think so. And then I want you to check out this next line. I've got too many people waiting on me. I've got to finish. That's what I said. And so what I ended up doing was I jumped back on this motorcycle with a broke hand, and I'm looking at my hand there. My throttle hand is what I crushed. And I broke my wrist and some of my ribs, and I couldn't even breathe at this point, and my head was a little bit loopy. But I turned around right here, and I took off, and you can stop the video right here, boom, and you can see those mountains there. I raced 4.5 to 5 hours over the top of those mountains in the desert, and I finished my part of the Baja 1000, giving the bike to the next guy, and finishing what I felt like God called me to finish, and then they medevaced me out. And I actually went to San Diego, and I was going to go to the hospital, and my boys said, Dad, we want to pick out the color of your cast. So I drove 4 days across country so they could pick out the color of my cast without even going to the doctor. How much do I love my kids, right? Okay? And they gave me this big monster green cast that I had for a while, which I looked really loopy, but you know, that's my boy, so I love it. But one of the things that I got was a call about 3 weeks or 4 weeks after I did this race, and it was the guy that taught me how to race in this race. He said, dude, you didn't listen to me at all. I said, I know. And he said, man, I can't tell you how much talk is going around about you right now. And I said, dude, I know. I'm sorry I embarrassed you. He said, embarrassed me? He said, dude, I probably picked up twice the business by having you. I said, what are you talking about, dude? I went down in the first 10 miles. And he said, that's not what makes you a Baja racer. He said, what makes you a Baja racer is that you got up and you finished what you started. He said, only 40% of the people that start this race finish it. He said, everybody down here is talking about this crazy pastor that was riding wheelies all through the city and broke his hand and arm and got back up and finished what God had called him to do. He said, you're the first guy, actually, that has ever been here and raced in this race and gave 1,000 Bibles out to children and spent time in orphanages. He said, man, you're awesome. And I'm like, dude, I can't ride a lick, but I do love Jesus, okay? And I probably won't ever do that again. One time's probably enough for me. And if I ever do it again, I'm going to do it with a truck, because with age comes a cage, right? All right, so we surround ourselves with road cages now. But I got to do something amazing for the kingdom of God. I got to live on the edge, and a lot of people talked bad about me for that. They did. They were like, dude, if you go, matter of fact, I had a pastor who was part of the prophetic church, and he called me and said, dude, I had a dream, and God told me you were going to die. Before I went, and I'm like, well, can't God tell me I'm going to die? What's he got to tell you? He said, I don't know, but God told me you're going to die. So I go, and on my way back, he calls me, he starts rubbing it in my face. I told you something was going to happen. I said, no, you told me I was going to die. I said, I broke my hand and my arm. I said, you need to get your connection right with God. You got a bad link. And he started telling me, dude, you shouldn't be doing this. You got a wife, you got 3 kids. And I'm like, dude, I went 100 miles an hour in the desert. I gave 1,000 Bibles out. I held children in my arms in orphanages and told them that God loved them, and they've never even been hailed by a godly man in their entire life. I witnessed to racers that cross the San Diego border to go through Tijuana to Ensenada that do nothing but sleep with crazy women the whole time they're in Ensenada. I mean, prostitution is out the roof in Ensenada, and most of it comes from these people crossing the border from America to go into Ensenada. I said, I got to share Christ with all of these people. I did all of that last week. I said, what did you do? And he got really quiet. And he's a pastor of a big church here in Charlotte. And he said, all right, man, you got me. I'll talk to you later. I said, peace, brother. Still a great friend. I just played golf with him last week, but really got to challenge him about living life on the edge, because sometimes we can get into a routine, right? We can get into a routine of just doing the average, ordinary, one-day-a-week Christianity, and that's not what is changing anybody's life. As a matter of fact, in Charlotte, we have over 700 churches, but only 17% of the people that live in Charlotte go to church. And we're losing 1% every year. Every year we're losing 1%. So the churches aren't doing it. The 4 walls of the church, I love the 4 walls of the church, but the times that I have experienced God the most has been outside the 4 walls of the church. Can anybody raise their hand and acknowledge that they've experienced God outside the 4 walls? You guys, you know what I'm talking about. So what I'm talking to you guys about today is living on the edge, because as I travel and as I speak in churches today all over America, we lack a little bit of things going on in our heart when it comes to having this ability to live on the edge and walk on water like Peter did. Let me read this to you. 14, verse 22, I think that's where it's going to start. You can put that scripture up so everybody can read it. Did that come up? We're stuck on the video? Oh, awesome.
There's a fight over here. I was breaking up a fight over here, sorry.
Fight? Is it my kids? Spank them, dude. I give you full permission. Go like the book of Proverbs. You got a good little thick belt there. Go ahead and do it. Matthew 14, verse 22. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after Jesus had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, Jesus was there alone. But the boat, full of disciples, by this time was a long way from the land. It was beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus came to them walking on the water. But when the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified, and they said, "It is a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." And here comes Peter. And I tell people all the time, if Peter had a statue of himself today, it would be him with a big foot right in his mouth. Because Peter always spoke out of turn, you see. Peter always had to be corrected by Jesus. And here he goes. He said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said to him what? Come. And a lot of people need to hear that today. But even more importantly than you guys that are here, I think a lot of the leaders that lead churches today need to hear that, because a lot of people that I know that preach the gospel preach this conservative Christianity, and they try to keep people from jumping out of the boat because they think it's going to bring a bad name to the church. Something radical is going to happen that they can't control. People are going to get saved. Revival might break out. All these uncontrolled circumstances. We can't start this contemporary service. I mean, what if we lose some tithing from one of the big members that can't stand to worship God that way? I mean, we keep people from jumping out of the box all the time because we want them to stay on the boat, because they feel like they can control them better when they're living this conservative Christianity. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is that Jesus looked at Peter, and Jesus could have said, "Peter, stay on the boat. Don't jump out of the boat. Don't walk on the water. Forget coming out here on the storm. It's dangerous. Let me come to you and we can have fellowship." But Jesus didn't say that. He looked right at him and he said, "Come out of the boat, wild man. Walk on the water. Let me see what you got. I love your passion. I love your leadership." So, Peter, not looking at the edge, he took a step of faith and he walked on water. The only guy to ever do that besides Christ. And we're still talking about it thousands of years later. Well, 2 things in particular that I want to challenge you with today that I try to challenge the church with, because a lot of times when I preach, people forget that I can see what's on your face when I preach. And when I go to churches and I start preaching about Jesus, people are like, and then they wonder why people don't come to church. I mean, literally, they're like, listen, we built this great building, we got great worship, and the preacher preaches the word, but nobody's showing up. That's because when people come to church, they don't see passion on people's faces. And I'm one of those people that believe that if you have passion, people will follow you. Now listen, I'm a guy, so I love guy movies, okay? Matter of fact, Labor Day is like my favorite weekend because they always play reruns of Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers, okay? I mean, I got my top 5 favorites. If you're a guy, you know